Welcome to this sewing tutorial video where I'll be showing you how to adjust the neckline of a boat neck style woven top to bring it in at the sides and give a bit more bra strap coverage. And I find it's quite a quick and easy adjustment to make, and the pattern I'm using as an example for this video is this pattern here, which is the cuff top by the assembly line, but this adjustment would work well on other boat neck style woven tops too. But I'll zoom in so you can see the neckline here. It's a really nice boat neckline shape to it, but it does come up a little bit on the wide side. So whenever I make this pattern, I always bring in the neckline at the sides just to give that bra strap coverage. So I'm going to show you how to make that adjustment to the pattern pieces in this video. So the cuff top has three main pattern pieces. There is a back piece, a front piece, and a neck facing piece. And you need to adjust each of these three pattern pieces at the neckline to bring the neckline in slightly. So I'm going to show you each of the adjustments that I make. So here is my front pattern piece for the cuff top, and this is the first pattern piece I'm going to adjust. And as you can see, I've traced it out onto some tracing paper. So I've got the shoulder seam up here and the neckline, the sleeve, and then down into the body. And I've cut all around the edges of the tracing paper except up here, which is the area I'm going to adjust. And I've left that uncut because I like to adjust directly onto the tracing paper. I just think it's a little bit easier and less fiddly. But if you have already cut out your cuff top pattern piece already, you can stick on an extra piece of paper here to make the adjustment. That is possible too. But I'll zoom in and show you the adjustment I've made. So here we've got the shoulder seam of the cuff top, and this is the line I'm going to cut along to finish the pattern piece off. And I've also added this dotted line here, which is the seam allowance. There's a 1 centimetre seam allowance on the shoulder seam. And I've added that in because this is the point at which I want to adjust the neckline. So here is my boat neckline, and the black lines show the original neckline per the pattern pieces. But I want to adjust to bring mine in, and I always make an adjustment to bring it in by 1.5 centimetres each side of the neckline. So I'll just grab my ruler and show you. I made this 1.5 centimetre line extra along the line of the seam allowance, and I want to make it at this point because this is the final seam of the top. So this is the point I want to bring it in by the full 1.5 centimetres. And I've extended it out, so I've given this extra little adjustment the full seam allowance there. And then what I've done is I've brought a line down here, a new line, which sort of curves in to create the boat neckline with a new, slightly brought in adjustment. So it's my new neckline here along the pink line, moving back into the black line. So it's quite a nice, simple adjustment there. And I'll show you the back piece now. So here is my back pattern piece now, and again I've traced it all out and cut it out, except I've left this bit here with the tracing paper so I can adjust onto there. So again I'll zoom in and show you I've made the same adjustment here. I've got the seam allowance here on the long dotted line, and I brought the seam allowance in again by the 1.5 centimetres and then extended the seam allowance out here, so I've got the full seam allowance for my extra adjusted piece. And again I've added the new pink curve here to bring it in line with the boat neckline. And for the back pattern piece, there's slightly less adjusting needed to do here because the neckline doesn't dip quite as much at the back. But it's the same simple adjustment as for the front. So the final pattern piece that needs to be adjusted in order to bring in the boat neckline of the cuff top is the neck facing pattern piece, which I've got here. The cuff top neckline is finished by a neck facing on the inside, and you cut this pattern piece on the fold. So you end up with this side plus a mirror image once you cut it out. And this is the centre front of the garment, and this is the centre back here, and you cut it all in one piece. So there's no seam allowance at the shoulder, but this is the shoulder seam here, and I'll zoom in to show you the adjustment. So I've got the shoulder seam highlighted as a dotted line, and I've made an adjustment to bring in the shoulder seam by 1.5 centimetres, just like I did on the front and back. So 1.5 centimetre adjustment here. And the way I've got these curves here on the front and back is by overlaying this pattern piece onto the adjustments I've made on the front and back pattern pieces, so I'll show you that now. So here's the adjustment I made to my front pattern piece of the cuff top, and I've got my neck facing pattern piece here. And to get this curve, what I need to do is overlay this pattern piece on top of the front pattern piece here. And I need to make sure I've got my front of the neck facing to align with the front pattern piece. They both match up. So I'm going to overlay them, and the first thing I need to make sure is aligned is this seam line here, this dotted seam line. And then the second thing I need to align is this black curve here. And there is a difference of 1 centimetre here at the front here, you can see. That is because the front pattern piece is designed to be sewn with a seam allowance of 1 centimetre down the front, whereas the neck facing is cut on the fold, so there's no seam allowance there. But once I've got them lined up, what I need to do then is trace this line on, so it's just exactly the same as the line on the pattern piece below that I've adjusted. So they should be exactly identical, so that when you then cut them both out and come to sew them together, those lines should match up just right. You also need to adjust the facing so that it also mirrors the adjustment made on the back pattern piece of the cuff top too. So I've got my back pattern piece here, And here's the facing, and again you need to make sure that you're matching up the back of the facing with the back neckline. So I'm going to turn this pattern piece over and line it up here. So again, lining up the shoulder seam, and this time the centre seam does line up with the back seam here because they both have a seam allowance built in. So I've got that lined up here, and then mirror that curve. So the facing and the back pattern piece will have exactly the same adjustment there and will match up nicely when you come to sew them together. So those are the 3 adjustments I make to the cuff top pattern pieces in order to bring in the boat neckline. I adjust the neckline of the front pattern piece and the back pattern piece and the neck facing piece. But I thought it was worth mentioning there is one other pattern piece that comes with the cuff top pattern, which is this pattern piece here. And this is a pattern piece to cut out using interfacing, and then you interface the neck facing just to add a bit of stability around the neckline of the cuff top. And this interfacing pattern piece is very similar to the facing pattern piece, which is with 2 differences. It's 1 centimetre smaller at the centre back, just for the centre back seam allowance, and it's also 0.5 centimetres smaller all the way around here, which is the seam allowance for the neckline. So I actually don't bother adjusting this pattern piece to bring in the neckline on it. What I do instead is just use my neck facing piece here to cut out the interfacing, and I trim the interfacing along the back seam allowance and around the neckline seam allowance too, and I find that way it works really well and is quite nice and straightforward. So I've got my 3 adjusted pattern pieces here now, and they're all ready to cut out, and then I can put them on the fabric and cut out the fabric and start sewing my assembly line cuff top, which has a slightly adjusted neckline to bring it in by 1.5 centimetres at each side, just to make it a little bit more bra strap friendly. And I've used a 1.5 centimetre adjustment at each side, but you could adjust that if you wanted to make it slightly bigger or slightly smaller adjustment. That would work absolutely fine too. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful too. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.